Thanks for taking the time, Brett. Really excited to chat about new story and everything, new it's sort of doing. But before we kind of get started, kind of take people back for those who don't know, what was sort of the original idea of New Story, sort of its mission and vision, and maybe what it's up to right now and sort of the future of what it looks like.
Yeah, originally got started about 10 years ago, and that happened right after a trip that I took to Haiti. I took a mission trip to Haiti a little after I graduated college, and it started a for-profit e-commerce company. And seeing the problem in Haiti, which was around 2014, was kind of the awakening to me of how big of a problem the global housing crisis is. And, obviously Haiti is one of the hardest places in the world to work. And, what you see there in person is extremely heartbreaking. And, the devastation can be arresting when you see it. So that's what, kind of captured my heart and my interest. And then kind of got started at a pretty young age with three amazing co-founders. And we say this all the time, to dream big, but to start small. And so we try to just get started on how do we create, a few housing solutions for just a few families in Haiti specifically, and try to do that in a way that is a little different than the status quo that we saw. And, so our heart and our DNA has really been about helping vulnerable families access life-changing housing. That's kind of been the through line of our story. And our DNA has really had a lot of innovation in it and trying to challenge the status quo in it. And so that kind of cocktail of helping vulnerable people get housing, innovation, challenging the status quo has been a lot of who we are. Now, over time, the strategy or the how we do that and the model has evolved tremendously, but that kind of heart and DNA has stayed pretty similar, to be honest, for a decade. And so that was some of the early days, and we were very fortunate to get into a program called Y Combinator, and we went through Y Combinator, which is most folks know it probably if you're in the startup world, of course, and if not, it's one of the world's top startup accelerator out in Silicon Valley, and we did that in the summer of 2015, and that was how we got going.
A decade is such a long time, man. So I guess what did you learn from, let's say, that first decade that made you say, okay, maybe shift the ideology of, okay, how do we look at global housing, the how, right? How do you solve that from a market-based solution versus maybe a traditional, nonprofit, sort of model?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like with anything, I think you learn by doing. And so I think our journey has been that. It's been getting started, not being, too paralyzed to get started, and to impact, thousands of families along the way that we're super proud of. But for us, and this does not have to be the same for everybody, but for us, we do feel called to a pretty big vision that is about helping millions and millions of people have life-changing housing. And so when you get into starting to do the math on what that actually looks like from a cost perspective, you very quickly see very large numbers with a lot of commas. And then when you start to really think long term, like, in my lifetime, I envision working on New Story for the rest of my lifetime. I would love to try to help as many people as possible have life-changing housing. And when you think about how big the problem is, which over 1 billion people don't have adequate housing today in 2024, you start talking about hundreds of billions, literally trillions of dollars. And so all my rambling there to say, New Story obviously cannot solve all that by ourselves. But the other thing we learned is that philanthropy only goes so far when you have a problem that is so big and expensive that the need transcends what is possible with philanthropy. And so when we started realizing those numbers, it was kind of a gut check to think about not changing our mission, not changing our heart, but really changing our core strategy model and thinking very differently with our head, which is this idea of how do we help more families that are currently inadequately housed and are part of the global housing crisis? How do we help them not be charitable beneficiaries, but how do we help them become customers in a housing market that they can participate in, and that what they are participating in, whatever that model is, which could be, housing finance, the lending, or the home being built, et cetera. And it's our belief that that needs to be unapologetically profitable. Because if not, what happens is nobody is incentivized to actually scale it when it comes to lending or building houses. And so once we had that realization, Grant, we went through a pretty tough transition as an organization because we had a certain staff that was hired for a particular strategy. We had certain owners that were giving to a certain strategy. And so we kind of went through honestly, a 2.5 year transition, or what I call a metamorphosis, pretty much. And in that metamorphosis, it was messy, it was ugly, and there was a lot of changes. But we now thankfully have been on the other side of that metamorphosis for probably the last at least 6-9 months. And it truly feels like a whole new world of opportunity that's available because we now have a model that is more market-based, and we'll explain what that means, and have a whole new world of capital as a pool to participate in that is exponentially bigger than just going after a pool of philanthropy capital. So last thing I'll say on this real quick, and I'll let you guide the next steps. Just for some of the numbers, the amount of, these are going to be big numbers, but the amount of global investable assets are somewhere around $270 trillion. Okay, big number. A lot of money out there that could be invested. The amount of philanthropy that was given to all causes in the world last year was about 500 billion. So 500 billion sounds like a big number.
Yeah.
But in comparison to 270 trillion, and knowing how many causes there are, 500 billion for housing, which is only one really important big cause, wouldn't even get close to solving the problem. It might make a really good dent. So anyways, that's just some math. And when you put your head around it, coming to that realization made us evolve and change our strategy, but not changing our mission and our heart.
Where does New Story fit into this stack? So let's say we have philanthropic capital, we have, let's say, investors, we have landowners, we have citizens who need housing. I guess how does it all work, right? What was that strategy? What did that actually spit out?
So we've got to a point now where really the only thing philanthropy is funding is R&D, which I think is a very high leverage, great use of philanthropy because it's risky. So it's funding some R&D that we're doing. That's many different projects, and then it also is funding the majority of our operational expenses for our staff. That's today. The other, the most expensive parts of trying to help somebody get housing are things like buying land, putting in infrastructure for large developments, the home construction cost. Philanthropy is not funding any of that. So that is funded by either impact investment or partnerships that we've created with local financing institutions or banks in the countries we work. And they are supplying the financing for the most expensive parts of helping a family get a house, which is basically land, infrastructure, and the actual home. And that's all being financed with lending or investing. So New Story has almost think of using philanthropy as R&D and staff. And then we have an investment firm that does financing for land acquisition, land development, and then we partner with local financial institutions for home lending or mortgages. So that's a little bit of the structure today. With more time and with more scale, New Story will actually become even more sustainable, where we'll just need less and less philanthropy over time, to where I think we'll get to a point where we're primarily using philanthropy for R&D or to enter new markets and to like really prove something. But then we're kind of letting the market dynamics take over, and you don't have to be dependent on having a staff funded by philanthropy there. So it is like a hybrid. It is different than what most people are used to hearing. And I think when you're trying to go work in difficult environments and truly catalyze and like pioneer certain models, philanthropy can be a great use of it. But in our opinion, you should be able to see an end game where you don't need to have philanthropy to sustain the impact in that area because you've proven something. And in our case, the market dynamics have taken over.
That's, yeah. The idea of every nonprofit is where they work, they should go out of business, right? Like that's almost should be the North Star. And, what success looks like is like, we don't have to be here anymore. Like that's an amazing, beautiful thing. You mentioned R&D. What exactly is that for New Story? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. I'd say there's like two main buckets of R&D for New Story. One of them is kind of the more shiny and exciting one. And that's like just the home product itself. Right. So the architecture of the house, materials for a home, technology for a house, et cetera. Just, taking swings at different models and prototypes to hopefully decrease the cost of a home for a lower income family to be able to purchase. So that's one big component. And we have some awesome architects and engineers on New Story's team that works on that. And then we like to bring in different partners to help collaborate on those efforts. And the whole goal there is to try to get lower cost, but high quality home products that families will want. Because again, when you view a family not as a charitable beneficiary, but as a customer, they have to want to purchase something. Right. And that's one of the best things about having a market-based model is you will know if you actually have product market fit, because if not, the family is not going to actually pay for something. Right. But if it's free or heavily subsidized, they'll probably try it out. So anyways, that's one component. And our whole goal with that is to find housing model or housing designs that families want, can afford. And then, of course, we can export those types of designs to other areas, even to other companies that are working on this. The other category of R&D for New Story is more around like community development. When I say that, I mean that in like a real estate term. So, if you think about designing a town of 1,000 lots that 4,000 people will live in, what does it look like for that structure? How is the urban planning designed? Is there mixed use? Is there parks, schools, those types of things? And then how do you help? So how do you like figure out what's the best configuration there? And you can test things. And then also, how do you have financial training programs that is going directly to help the families that participate in these programs as customers? How could they have some extra training and access to education that helps them on their journey to basically becoming a homeowner and increasing their net worth and having better financial inclusion? We do trying different ways to teach and to train.
Talk a little bit about the communities where New Story works. It's like mostly Latin America. I don't think.
Yeah.
Have y'all been back to Haiti after New Story, or is it really just Latin America?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we 3 countries that we work in today are Haiti, El Salvador, and Mexico. Primarily Mexico right now. We have a heart for Haiti. We would not exist without Haiti. But about 3 years ago, we had to stop doing new work there just because it was too difficult and too dangerous to start new projects. However, we've been fortunate to partner with thousands of families in Haiti and hope to one day work there again. And then we've had a great relationship in El Salvador for almost a decade. Love that country, and Mexico now is the primary focus and where most of our staff is. So we will likely expand to a few other countries in Latin America in the coming years, definitely this decade. And that's where our sights are set right now. So hopefully more later on in the future, but we're trying to focus as much as we can, which is difficult when there's a lot of opportunity around the world, but we're trying our best to say no to things.
Going back to R&D for a bit, and I know this might not have anything to do with it, but we talk about buying a home, right? We're talking about maybe financial literacy. We're talking about, what does that mean when you buy a home? There's also repair costs, and there's other things you got to navigate, right? It's just totally. It can be difficult. When we talk about these citizens, like, where are they at in sort of their points in their life? Is there financial literacy around, hey, buying a home? There's certain things is there certain money that needed to save? I mean, obviously they have lenders in the local area. They probably have some type of checklist that they check off to accept a new loan. But does New Story sort of, if you're attached to it as New Story, does that say, hey, this community is sort of ready for financing? I guess, what does the whole financial literacy look like?
Yeah, I mean, we try to, right now we have a program that we call the Home Journey. And so Home Journey is a program that is ever evolving and continuously improving. But the whole goal of that program is to help a family that, I'd say the status quo is that they currently are not homeowners and they currently don't own land and they currently don't have access to affordable home financing. And so it is a training program and a literacy program that is a path to how they can and what do they need to do? How do they, certain savings, building a credit profile, obviously participating in our program where families pay for land first is a great way to help. But it's a lot about some of those details you mentioned of how much certain things will cost in the future, different options for, a starter house or what they would want their home designs to be, and just trying to have a great interaction with the family. And, now what's really exciting is being able to do a lot of that digitally and having courses that we're going to be making, and you can do a lot of that on video. Obviously, with the future of what can happen with AI in a lot of these areas that we work with, construction and cost and local materials, and how does that all get packaged into something that's easy to understand, and you don't need a bunch of team members or local team members that have to go get all this information, but AI can help. And so those are just some examples of me riffing on this program that we have.
When you sort of made this big sort of transition, were you some of the first, I guess, participants, former, villages or towns that you've been in before, or it was this totally new areas you went to do this?
Yeah, it was all new areas that we kind of did the new model in. I don't know if that was super intentional. That's just kind of, when we started to look for new land, et cetera, municipalities, it just kind of worked out of doing it in new areas.
How do you choose an area?
Yeah, a lot goes into it. A couple things. The location needs to be relatively close to town commerce, so families have access to, of course, jobs and school and transportation. From there, we ideally want the municipality to be behind this and to be supportive of it. That does not mean that that government subsidy is requisite. We actually don't. Our model is not dependent on government putting in money, but we do really want their support with permitting, and it's a real estate play at the end of the day, right? So there are codes. So we need a municipality that wants to be excited about this, and thankfully we're getting a lot of great inbound requests from municipalities that are hearing about this model.
That's
and
great.
We'd love for New Story to explore building, basically building new towns in their municipality. And then, of course, we need to make sure that there are families that are inadequately housed, but at the same time, a steady enough income. Most families are, around the poverty line. Some are well below the poverty line. Some are right at the poverty line. Some are a little above the poverty line. But we need to make sure that they have some type of income source because they are paying for a product. yeah, I need to make sure that we can, have a real estate development partner or home builder that wants to be involved. So there's some things. There's other stuff that goes into it, but those are the main things.
When you say that, you obviously want the buy-in from the municipality. When you talk to people, is it literally like you or News Story talking to like the local mayor? Is it talking to like land developers?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I guess who needs to get the buy-in?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not me. It's my amazing team members that are based in Mexico, and we have a couple different kind of divisions that focus on that. Some of my team members focus more on municipal relationships. Some focus more on the development or land development or real estate development partners. And yeah, it's having conversations with them and trying to learn more about their interests, their vision, and trying to have an intersection that makes sense with our mission. And so
last time we talked a little bit about innovating in sort of the nonprofit space and how that can be difficult. Like you said, there was obviously pushback from maybe employees or donors when you and the team decided to go down this path. What were those conversations like? And I guess what were maybe some of the issues that they had with sort of doing this sort of transition?
I think when you're in the beginning of doing anything that feels like a big change, understandably so, not everybody is going to be all excited about that, right? The reasonable gravitational pull is to say, well, I have all these objections. This probably won't work. Well, why isn't this already happening? How are we going to test this? How do we truly transition the organization to doing this? Do you have the right staff to do this? So in the beginning, I feel like almost with anything that a company does to make a big change, or a nonprofit making a big change, that is a very serious decision and is not usually going to be met with everybody approving it on day one, right? You should feel resistance. That's very normal. And so, we felt a lot of that. And like I mentioned in the beginning of our chat, a lot of it was messy, for almost a year, even 2 years. And the reason it was messy is because we were saying things philosophically that people agreed with. And the theory sounded good, right? Which means, hey, the problem's so big. We need market-based solutions. We need, low-income families that aren't currently being served by the market to be served by the market. We want to incentivize lenders and developers to do this. All that stuff sounds great, right? And the theory of it sounds great.
Yeah.
But then when you actually get into executing and doing the work, you learn stuff. And it just takes time to figure out what you really need to do, what doesn't work, to test your assumptions, to test your hypotheses. And we did that for almost 2 years. And, now we're at a point where it's pretty much been a refounding of the organization. I know that's a pretty big statement, but that is what it feels like. It feels like we, again, didn't change our mission or our vision, but the whole business model and how we delivered it is entirely changed. And so back to your original question, I don't know if there could have been any way of doing it differently because it just required a significant change. And I think when you make a significant change and you're trying to pioneer something, it's going to be messy and it's going to be hard and it's going to take time. And hopefully you make the right bet and you start to see, signs of hope, which we saw, signs of traction, which we saw. And now we're at a point where we still have everything to prove. But we have a ton of confidence. We have the most momentum we've had in a very long time. But that didn't come with going through a pretty deep valley, to be honest. So
I'll end on 2 questions here.
Sure.
One would be, is real estate uniquely placed in the nonprofit sector where you can have a market-based solution to solve a massive problem? Obviously we have mental health, education.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Water. There's all these issues within nonprofits that a lot of organizations try to solve.
Yep.
We can't necessarily put a market-based solution on maybe some of these other problems, or maybe can.
That's a great question.
Right?
That's a great question. Okay, really important question. First thing that comes to mind is market-based solutions, I do not think work for every problem. That said, I think they work for way more problems than many people think, or even go down the rabbit hole of exploring what's possible with a market-based solution for certain social problems that you just kind of hear about, and it's human nature, and the status quo is to think you can't apply a market-based solution to this, and if you did, it would require all these things. So like, I think it definitely is not for every social problem by any means, and I think it can be applied to way more than pretty much everybody believes. And I think the best thing to do is just go down and exercise, a rabbit hole, and think about it just as an exercise. Like, if I had to do this as a market-based solution, which really just means selling a product that eventually can have a profitable unit economics to it, what would it look like? What would it take? Could a family actually afford to buy seeds at a certain price, or to buy water at a certain price? And I think you just have to do that exercise. But then, there's a lot of things that I don't think work for a market-based solution. And that's just kind of up to the entrepreneur and the management team. But, I'm biased because we've gone through this journey, I think. And so I'm kind of drinking my own Kool-Aid here of the journey that we've been on. Yeah. I think when you can have a market-based solution, it really does, or even a hybrid, right? Like News Story has a hybrid. There's an organization that has really inspired us called water.org and Water Equity. They have a hybrid. There's another organization that's really inspired us, is called Root Capital. They help finance kind of small or medium-sized farmers throughout the world. I like this hybrid concept, if possible, where you're still using philanthropy for some training and R&D and staff, but then the most expensive parts of it all is being financed with either a loan or an investment or a provider that can that's profitable.
Yeah. So I'll end here on just a little bit about the future, and I know you've said it took 18, 24 months to kind of really get to a place where everything's kind of cooking a little bit. Mm-hmm. What does the next 3 to 5 years look like? What are some of the goals and successes you and the team would like to achieve?
Yeah, it's a great question, Grant. I really do feel, been in this for coming up on 10 years. We're going to celebrate our 10-year anniversary later this year. And that obviously makes you think about the next 10 years. And, I can say with every bone in my body that this is the most excited I've ever been. And I'm really, really amped up for the next decade. And the reason for that is because we have found a model that I believe took us almost a decade to figure out. And now on the other side of that, to me, I'm going to worry less about where to get capital because, constantly thinking about, and I love raising money. Like, I actually like the fundraising side, but it's a totally different calculus if I can just have, if our team can go out and execute in the way that we say we're going to execute with our actual on-ground model. And because it's working and because the unit economics are positive, that can basically attract almost unlimited amounts of capital to help us grow. And that can be loans, it could be development banks, it could be pension funds in countries we work in. And we're talking about a lot of money, which to us would be like hundreds of millions of dollars. And then eventually, a few $billion that can just come from the capital markets. And that's really exciting. And the next 3 to 5 years is our opportunity to execute and to build a track record that is, essentially qualified to get these larger pools of capital because we have proven we have an engine that works and you just apply financing to it or lending to it. And and it's still hard work to get that money, of course, but it's very different because you can really focus the whole company on creating a product that the customer loves and growing that business, right? Which is different than thinking about all the other things that a nonprofit usually has to think about. So, but it's a long way to go. It's hard. This stuff is super challenging. And so I just really admire and deeply respect anyone that is, taking their precious time to work on important problems that, honestly, a lot of people choose not to work on. It's very important, and we're taking a swing, and we're going to try our best.
But if you layer a market-based solution on top of these things, you start to see more people wanting to be involved. And
that actually is very true.
That
is very true. It's a great point.
Let that be the case. It doesn't matter how we get there, as long as the problem gets solved and the outcome is what we all aspire to, then.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that's great. That's a great point. That's a really great point. Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, Grant. Appreciate your thoughtful questions.
Have a great week, man. Best of luck to you and the team for the next decade.